My wife, fresh from the delivery room, was forced to hobble onto a city bus and make her own way home. Meanwhile, I casually drove my Maybach, taking my entire family out for a celebratory dinner. I had no idea it would be the last ride of my lavish life. Just 2 hours later, my empire would crumble, and I would be a bankrupt man. And when the true identity of my seemingly ordinary wife was revealed, my family could only tremble in fear. What terrifying truth lay behind this woman? The smell of antiseptic in the hospital was so strong it made my nostrils burn, or maybe it was the nameless bitterness welling up inside me. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clutching my lower abdomen, where the C-section incision, only 5 days old, still seeped blood and throbbed with a sharp, insistent pain every time I moved. Around me, other new mothers were being gently supported by their husbands, fed spoonfuls of warm soup by their mothers-in-law, the room filled with cheerful chatter about the futures of their newborn babies. But I was alone, with a shabby duffel bag and my tiny son sleeping soundly in his bassinet. Ethan, my husband, the man I once thought was my entire world, was leaning against the window frame. He didn't look at me once. His fingers flew frantically across his phone screen as he muttered numbers from some project he was always boasting about, a multi-million-dollar deal. "Are you done yet? You're so slow," Ethan snapped, his eyes still glued to the screen. "The doctor signed your discharge papers half an hour ago. Who are you trying to guilt-trip by just sitting there?" I bit my lip, trying to suppress the searing pain from my incision, and struggled to my feet. The heavy duffel bag on my shoulder made me sway. I looked at him, my eyes pleading. "Ethan, my incision still hurts so much. Could you please carry the bag for me? I have to hold the baby." Ethan finally looked up, his brow furrowed in annoyance, as if I had asked for something outrageous. He clicked his tongue, snatched the bag from my shoulder, and slung it over his own with a jerk. "You women are so soft. My grandmother used to say they'd have a baby and be cooking dinner an hour later. Now you complain about a little pain. Hurry up, my mom is calling." The mention of my mother-in-law made my heart clench. Brenda, the woman who always told the neighbors she loved me like her own daughter, but behind my back scrutinized every grain of rice I dropped, every strand of hair I shed. Ethan's phone rang again. He put it on speaker, and Brenda's shrill voice echoed through the quiet hospital room. "Ethan, honey, come on down. Me and Sarah are waiting at the main entrance. Let's get to that steakhouse." I booked a table at Oceanic Prime to celebrate my grandson's arrival. "We have to celebrate in style, make everyone jealous." I felt a lump form in my throat. Celebrating their grandson, but not a single word of concern for the daughter-in-law who had just gone through a life-threatening surgery to bring him into the world. I spoke up timidly. "Honey, I just gave birth. The doctor said I need to avoid crowds and rich food. A steak and seafood dinner isn't a good idea for me right now." Ethan whipped his head around, his eyes as sharp as daggers. "Who said you were going? You're going home to watch the house. Mom says you have bad juju right after giving birth, that you'll jinx my business deals if you come along. I'll drop you off at the corner. You can walk from there." His words were like a bucket of ice water dumped on me in the middle of winter. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with for 2 years, and suddenly he seemed like a terrifying stranger. So, in their eyes, I was just an incubator. Once my job was done, I was disposable, a jinx, bad luck. I bent down to pick up my son, hiding the tears that threatened to spill. The baby stirred, making little sucking noises for milk. "Oh, my sweet boy," I thought. "That's your father, and that's your grandmother. They welcome you with a lavish party but cast your mother aside like trash." I took a deep breath, swallowing my bitterness. Fine. If they were going to be this heartless, I no longer needed to play the role of the gentle, submissive wife. Ethan was already striding out of the room, not even glancing back to see how his wife and newborn son were managing. I followed, each heavy step sending a jolt of pain through my body, but the physical agony was nothing compared to the knife twisting in my heart. Out in the hallway, a cold draft made me shiver. Ethan walked ahead, his back straight, the picture of an arrogant, rising executive. He had no idea the curtain was about to fall on his little play, and the price for today's cruelty would be far more expensive than any dinner he had ever eaten. The elevator doors closed, shutting me off from the hospital's noise but creating a suffocating silence between us. Ethan admired his reflection in the mirrored wall, adjusting the collar of his blazer. "Gotta look sharp for the partners later," he muttered. I looked at him and sneered internally. "Sharp? Let's see what's left of you when that shiny veneer is stripped away, besides your own pathetic weakness." A cool autumn breeze hit me as we exited the building, and I quickly pulled the blanket tighter around my son. The first thing I saw was the gleaming black Maybach parked brazenly in the VIP pickup lane. That was my car. To be precise, it was a wedding gift my father had secretly given me, but Ethan had sweetly borrowed it to impress his business partners and had gradually claimed it as his own, a trophy to flaunt to the world. He strutted towards it with a cocky air, pulled out a handkerchief, and wiped an imaginary speck of dust from the hood, treating the car with more care than he ever showed his wife and child. I thought he would open the door for us to get out of the wind, but no. He stood blocking the door, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He thrust the 20 into my hand, looking at me as if I were a beggar. "Here." His voice was cold, devoid of emotion. "The bus stop is right across the street. The fare is only $2.75, so you'll have enough left over for a bottle of water. Take the M15. It goes right by our neighborhood." I stared at the green bill in my hand, then at the $500,000 luxury car beside him. The comparison was excruciating. His wife, 5 days after a C-section, her wound still fresh, was being sent to a crowded public bus while he drove off alone in a super-luxury sedan. "What did you say?" My voice trembled, not from the cold but from pure rage. "You want me to take our 5-day-old son on a bus? Are you even human? This car is huge. Why can't we ride in it?" Ethan scoffed, a look of disgust on his face. "What do you know? I have to pick up Mom and Sarah, and then I'm meeting my partners for the contract signing. Look at you. You reek of sour milk, your hair's a mess, your clothes are frumpy. If you sit on my imported Italian leather, the smell will never come out. And what if the baby spits up? Do you know how much it costs to get the interior detailed?" "Your Italian leather?" I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Ethan, have you forgotten whose name is on the title of this car?" His face darkened. He hated being reminded of my family's money. He jabbed a finger at my forehead, hissing through clenched teeth. "Don't you dare pull that heiress crap with me. You married into the Thompson family, so what's yours is ours. I'm the one earning the money to support this family now, and I make the decisions. If you know what's good for you, take the money and go. Don't make me angry, or you won't even get the 20. With that, he turned his back, opened the driver's side door, and carefully brushed off the seat before sitting down, as if afraid of contamination from the hospital air. I stood there, frozen, staring at the man I had once loved, for whom I had sacrificed my youth and abandoned a life of luxury to follow the call of love. Was this what our love was worth? A crumpled $20 bill? A car horn blared behind me. Passers-by started to point and stare at the woman holding a baby, crying in the cold, next to the smug man in the luxury car. But Ethan didn't care. His ego was bigger than the sky, but his dignity was smaller than a speck of dust. I clenched the bill in my hand, so tightly my nails dug into my palm. The sting was a welcome distraction. "Fine. You're afraid I'll dirty your car, right? You're afraid the smell of my baby will embarrass you, right? I will remember this day, this Maybach, and that pathetic excuse for an ego you've built. I will take it all back, every last cent." "I'm going," I said, my voice raw and hoarse. I turned and walked away without looking back, but I knew the best part of the show was yet to begin. In the distance, a taxi pulled up, and 2 familiar figures in gaudy, eye-watering outfits stepped out. "Oh my God, my golden boy, my precious son. Look at this car, it's gorgeous." Brenda's piercing voice cut through the dreary atmosphere. She was wearing a tight red velvet dress, a string of fake pearls as large as marbles around her neck, and clunky platform heels, tottering towards the Maybach. Following her was Sarah, Ethan's sister, also in a sequined dress that sparkled absurdly in the daylight, her face caked in enough makeup for a stage performance. They rushed to Ethan's side, one stroking the hood, the other caressing the side mirror, cooing as if they'd struck gold. Brenda's eyes crinkled into a smile as she slapped Ethan's shoulder. That's my son. A real CEO. This is the kind of car you deserve. Now who in this city would dare look down on our family? Ethan leaned against the car, grinning smugly. The meek expression he had worn while talking to me was gone, replaced by an air of arrogant superiority. I stood a short distance away, huddled with my son under a large oak tree to shield him from the wind, watching their family reunion with a heart as cold as ice. They walked right past me as if I were invisible, a piece of trash on the sidewalk not worth a second glance. Sarah was the first to spot me. She shot me a sideways glance and curled her lip. "Oh, look, still haven't caught a bus, sister-in-law? Looking that shabby, even a taxi wouldn't stop for you. Probably think you're bad luck. Better start walking to the bus stop. A little exercise will help your uterus shrink." She covered her mouth and let out a shrill, cruel laugh. Brenda finally turned to me. Her gaze held no trace of sympathy, only coldness and scrutiny. "Hey, when you get home, use the back door. You hear me? Don't bring your bad luck in through the front. And make sure you clean the kitchen as soon as you get there. The place has been a mess since you've been in the hospital. Sarah and I have had to eat out every night. Do you know how much of Ethan's money that costs? Useless woman. Just lie around all day after popping out a kid." I looked at her red velvet dress, at the way she lovingly touched her son's arm, and then down at her own newborn grandson, whom she hadn't even glanced at. The blood in my veins boiled, but my mind told me to be patient. Now was not the time. "Mom, the baby is so little. The bus is crowded. He could get sick." I tried, making one last appeal to their conscience. But Ethan cut me off. He opened the rear door and respectfully ushered Brenda in as if she were a queen. "Get in, Mom. Ignore her. She's used to her silver spoon life. A few bus rides will teach her about the real world, maybe motivate her to work harder. Let's go eat." I booked the VIP room. The car door slammed shut. The quiet purr of the $500,000 engine started. The car began to move, and then, as if to mock me, a tire rolled through a puddle, splashing dirty water all over my pants and old canvas shoes. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Sarah's triumphant smirk and Brenda's satisfied nod. The black car's silhouette faded into the bustling city traffic, leaving me alone with the wind, the dust, and a profound, soul-crushing humiliation. Only then did the tears finally stream down my face, hot against my cold cheeks. I wasn't crying for the car. I was crying for my son, and for my own blindness. For 2 years, I had left behind my privileged life to chase what I thought was the sincere love of a poor but ambitious man. But I saw no ambition now, only greed, pettiness, and cruelty. I wiped my tears away with the back of my hand. My expression changed. The submissive weakness was gone. My patience had reached its absolute limit. I pulled my old, simple phone from my bag, my hand trembling as I dialed a familiar number, a number I hadn't dared to call in 2 years. A deep, authoritative, and worried voice answered on the other end. "Hello? Who is this?" I took a deep breath, my voice choked but firm. "Dad, I was wrong. Please, come get your grandson. I can't stay in this hell for another second." The M15 bus screeched to a halt, exhaling a cloud of black exhaust. The doors hissed open, and a crowd of people surged forward like a broken dam. I clutched my son tightly to my chest, using my own frail body as a shield, trying to navigate through the forest of shoulders and arms to find a place to stand. The bus was packed. The sour stench of sweat, gasoline, and damp clothing mingled into a thick, nauseating miasma. The C-section wound throbbed with every jolt and shudder of the old vehicle. I gritted my teeth, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead, my legs trembling so badly I thought I would collapse. Move in, make room!" the driver yelled. I was shoved against the cold glass of the window. My baby, Noah, startled by the crush of bodies, began to wail. His tiny cries were lost in the cacophony of the city, but they pierced my heart like a needle. "Hey, someone give that young lady with the baby a seat!" An elderly woman with snow-white hair called out from nearby. "She's going to fall over." The woman then shakily stood up and waved me over. "Here, dear, you take my seat. You look pale as a ghost, bless your heart." Tears welled in my eyes as I bowed my head and thanked her profusely. A complete stranger, no blood relation, was willing to give up her seat for me and my son. And my husband, my child's father, had thrown us out onto the street in our most vulnerable moment. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. Once seated, I finally allowed myself to exhale. The bus lumbered on, each pothole sending a nauseating lurch through my body. I stared out the window at the endless stream of cars. The skyscrapers, the glamorous lights of this city, none of it had ever felt like it belonged to me since the day I married into Ethan's family. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a notification for an Instagram Live from Sarah. The caption, dripping with sarcasm, hit me like a punch. Taking my amazing mom and my CEO brother out for a celebratory dinner for the new heir. Number living the high life, number family first. As if possessed, I tapped to watch. On the tiny screen, the opulent interior of the steakhouse appeared in sharp detail. The table was laden with plates of Wagyu beef, its marbling perfect, bright red lobsters, and towers of fresh greens. Steam rose from the table, a picture of warmth and comfort, a stark contrast to the cold, rattling bus. Just then, Brenda grabbed a microphone apparently. The restaurant had private room karaoke. Her face was flushed with wine as she belted out, "My son is paying for everything tonight. Eat up, everyone. Our family is in a different league now." Ethan sat beside her, swirling a glass of red wine, his face tilted towards the ceiling in a smug grin as he addressed Sarah's phone. "Hey everyone, so happy tonight. My wife, oh she's tired, so she's resting at home. Only the most important people are here tonight." The most important people. His wife and newborn son were struggling on a public bus, but his ego was the most important guest at his table. Just then, the bus stopped at a red light. I glanced numbly at the lane beside us, and my heart skipped a beat. Right next to my grimy bus, through a tinted window, I recognized it immediately. My Maybach, but Ethan wasn't driving. A valet from the restaurant was parking it in the lot. It turned out I had traveled right past the very restaurant where they were celebrating. We were separated by a single pane of glass, yet we were in two different worlds. One was a glittering fake illusion, the other was the raw, painful truth. I stared at my car, then down at my phone screen where Ethan was laughing at my expense. "Noah," I whispered to my sleeping son, "look closely. This is the last time your father will ever smile so smugly. I promise you." The light turned green. The bus shuddered and pulled away, leaving the bright lights of the steakhouse behind. Inside me, a plan for revenge began to take shape, colder and clearer than ever before. The submissive wife was dead. All that remained was a mother rising to protect her child. The thumping bass from the restaurant's sound system, mixed with the roar of other diners, created a chaotic but distinctly expensive atmosphere. The spicy, rich aroma of grilled steak and garlic butter filled the air, stimulating the appetites of those hungry for vanity. Through Sarah's still-live Instagram feed, I watched Ethan flag down a waiter with the imperious air of a king summoning a servant. "Hey, bring us 2 more orders of the A5 Wagyu. A bottle of the O5 Bordeaux. Oh, and the molten lava cake for my mom. She needs to keep her strength up." The young waitress bowed politely, though a flicker of hesitation crossed her face. "Sir, those are some of our pricier items. Would you like to review the menu again?" Ethan slammed his hand on the table, making Brenda, who was gnawing on a lobster claw, jump. He glared at the waitress. "Are you implying I can't afford it? Do you know who I am? I'm the CEO of Apex Innovations. Just bring it. Money is no object." Sarah aimed the camera at her brother's face, her own expression a mask of fawning admiration. "See, everyone? My brother is a true mogul. He spoils his mom and sister like no one else. Not like some cheapskate sister-in-law I know who haggles over the price of lettuce." Brenda, swallowing a mouthful of steak, chimed in. "That's right. His wife is completely useless. Good for nothing. Thank God this family has Ethan to bring in the money, or we'd be on the streets. Now eat up, son, eat up. You need your strength to make more money." Ethan beamed, reaching into his blazer pocket and pulling out a knockoff alligator wallet he'd bought on Canal Street. From inside, he ceremoniously extracted a sleek, black credit card, holding it up to the camera like a trophy. "Paying with the black card tonight. Just a swipe, no need to even look at the price." Watching this on the bus, I burst out laughing. People turned to stare at me like I was crazy, but I didn't care. That was a supplementary credit card I had set up for him a year ago, with a $50,000 limit linked directly to my personal trust fund account. He always believed the bank had given it to him based on his company's prestige, never knowing that it was only approved because I had used my own savings as collateral. For the past year, he had been spending my money lavishly on shopping sprees, on other women, and then coming home to lie about it being a project bonus. I knew everything, but I had turned a blind eye, wanting to preserve the peace in our family. But tonight, that card would be his one-way ticket to hell. I closed the Instagram app and opened my mobile banking app. My finger hovered over the card management section. Secondary cardholder, Ethan Thompson. Status, active. I took a breath. On the other side of the city, Ethan was still rambling on about his imaginary projects, about the glorious future of the Thompson family. Brenda and Sarah were still cackling over a pile of money they thought was his. "Eat up," I muttered. "Enjoy every last bite, because soon you'll be coughing it all back up." My finger pressed down. Beep. A confirmation message appeared on the screen. "Card successfully locked. All future transactions will be declined." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my father. "I've sent someone to get you. The car is waiting at the next bus stop. Come home, my daughter. The game is over." I turned off my phone, holding my son close. The bus slowly pulled into the next stop. Through the drizzling rain that had begun to fall, I saw a fleet of black Rolls-Royces, waiting like silent panthers for their master. My father's longtime head of staff, David, a kind man with silver hair, stood holding a large black umbrella, his eyes anxiously scanning the crowd. The curtain had fallen. It was time for the phoenix to rise from the ashes. As for those crows, they had no idea the storm that was about to break over their heads. The drizzle turned into a steady downpour, cold drops hitting my face and neck. But strangely, I didn't feel the cold anymore. The fire of retribution in my heart was burning too brightly, incinerating every last trace of the fragile woman who had just walked through the valley of death. The lumbering bus pulled away from the curb, leaving me standing under the flimsy, leaking shelter of the bus stop. But I hadn't gotten back on. I knew my home wasn't the place where that treacherous man was. From a distance, the convoy of black cars approached, parting the sea of rush-hour traffic with an intimidating grace. A Rolls-Royce Phantom with a custom license plate led the way, flanked by 2 Range Rover escorts. Pedestrians stopped and stared, likely thinking a head of state was passing through. The Phantom pulled up directly in front of me. The door swung open, and a man in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and a meticulously tailored suit, rushed out. David, the man who had practically raised me, hurried from the passenger seat, holding a large black umbrella to shield me and my son. "Miss Olivia! Oh, my dear Miss Olivia." David's voice was thick with emotion, on the verge of tears. But my eyes were fixed on the man standing frozen before me. My father, William Sterling, the chairman of Sterling Holdings, a man whose slightest cough could send tremors through the city's business world. My father looked at me, then at his newborn grandson wrapped in a worn, old blanket, and then down at my own mud-splattered canvas shoes. His eyes turned red, and a vein pulsed on his forehead. He didn't say a word. He just lunged forward and pulled both of us into a tight embrace. His broad, strong shoulders trembled. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I buried my face in his chest, which smelled faintly of cedarwood and success. Tears streamed down, washing away the grime of the city and the stain of my humiliation. I was so wrong. "Let's go home, sweetheart. I'm here now." His voice was deep, laced with a pain he was trying to suppress. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over me, carefully shielding his grandson from the wind. I was helped into the car. The interior was warm, smelling of rich leather and a hint of orange essential oil. The family's private doctor immediately began checking on Noah. I leaned back into the plush seat, feeling as if I had just woken from a long, grueling nightmare. My father sat beside me, his hand gripping my cold one. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. He didn't need speakerphone. In the quiet sanctuary of the car, I heard every cold, brutal word he uttered. "Hello, it's Sterling. Within the next 2 hours, I want Ethan Thompson's little startup, Apex Innovations, wiped off the city's business map. Cut all his credit lines, freeze his accounts, and get the IRS and the SEC to pay him a visit. The reason? The reason is he dared to make my daughter ride the bus. My father hung up, tossing the phone aside. He stared out the window at the storm raging outside, his expression as sharp as a razor. He wants status? I'll show him what it means to be a nobody. He loves money? I'll let him taste what it's like to have nothing. The car glided away, carrying me far from the fake poverty I had so foolishly embraced. But a vague worry lingered. Ethan was a petty man. When cornered, would he try to bite back? While I was being cocooned in my father's care, back at the most expensive restaurant in the city, the Thompson family's celebration was reaching its peak. I knew every detail, because the restaurant's security system was owned by my father's corporation, and I was watching a live feed on an iPad. The VIP table was a mountain of food. Steam rose into the air, mingling with the raucous laughter of 3 people drunk on their perceived victory. Ethan sat in the middle, face flushed, swirling his wine glass, spouting nonsense about his make-believe deals. "Don't you worry, Mom. I'm hitting it big this year. That Westgate development project is in the bag. I've sunk everything into it. One signature, and the money will pour in like a flood. I'll buy you a lakeside mansion, hire a dozen maids to wait on you." Brenda was ecstatic, grinning so wide her eyes disappeared. She placed a massive shrimp on her son's plate. "Oh, you sweet talker. But listen, son, you need to keep an eye on that wife of yours. She's from the sticks. Now that we're rich, she might try to sneak money back to her poor parents. I just don't trust her kind." "Oh, Mom, don't worry about it." Ethan waved a dismissive hand, chewing on a piece of Wagyu. "She's an idiot. Does whatever I say. I control all the money. I have her bank cards. What can she do? All she's good for is having babies and cooking." Sarah, still live streaming, chimed in. "Totally, Mom. My sister-in-law is as dumb as a rock. Ethan told her to get on the bus today, and she just stood there with a blank face, didn't even argue. It was hilarious. Everyone watching. Give my brother a like. That's how a real man trains his wife." I watched the screen, my finger tracing a line on the cold glass. Train his wife? We'll see who's training whom. Just then, Ethan's phone rang. It was his strategic partner, a man Ethan always bragged was his brother from another mother. He motioned for his family to be quiet, smoothed his hair, adopted a serious tone, and answered the call. "Hey, Greg, it's Ethan. I'm at dinner. Have you arrived yet? I can have them set another place." But the smile on Ethan's face vanished, snuffed out like a candle in a hurricane. His face went from red to pale to a bloodless white. His hand trembled, and his chopsticks clattered to the table. "What? What do you mean? We had a deal." "Greg, wait, listen to me. Hello? Hello?" The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone in a daze, beads of sweat popping on his forehead. The Westgate project, the single lifeline that was keeping his finances afloat, had just been canceled. The partner had been brief. "We received a directive from the top. We're forbidden from doing business with your company." "What is it, son? What's wrong?" Brenda asked, concerned, a piece of fish still halfway to her mouth. Ethan flinched, quickly waving his hand and forcing a pained smile. "Nothing, Mom. Nothing. Just a small hiccup. He had a sudden emergency. Let's keep eating." He grabbed his wine glass and drained it in one gulp, but his hand shook so badly that wine sloshed onto his expensive white shirt. He didn't know that was just the opening shot in the financial massacre my father had orchestrated for him. Ping. A text message alert on Ethan's phone. He glanced down. It was from his bank. "Your corporate account has been frozen at the request of federal authorities." Ethan's eyes widened in horror. He blinked, but the damning words remained on the screen. My father's car had brought me to the gates of our family estate. The golden wrought-iron gates slowly swung open, revealing a stone-paved driveway leading to a magnificent mansion that, for the past 2 years, I had only dared to look at on Google Maps to soothe my homesickness. The car was silent, but I knew that on the other side of the city, my husband's world was just beginning to implode. The moment my foot touched the plush red carpet in the foyer, the phone in my bag vibrated. It was Ethan. I looked at the screen, at the contact name My Love that I had once so carefully saved. How ironic it seemed now. I took a deep breath, gestured for everyone to be quiet, and answered. "Hello?" My voice was light, unnervingly calm. "Where the hell are you?" Ethan's roar came through the phone, a mixture of panic and baseless anger. "Are you home yet? Is dinner ready? I've been calling the landline, and no one's picking up. Are you going to make me and my mother come home to instant noodles?" He still had no idea he was standing on the edge of a cliff. He was still using that domineering, patriarchal tone with me, as if he thought I was still that mousy girl slaving away in our cramped, greasy kitchen. "I'm not at the apartment, Ethan," I replied, my eyes admiring the brilliant crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling. "I'm at my father's house." "Your father's house?" he scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "That little shack in the countryside? Why would you drag the baby to that godforsaken place, so he can pick up your peasant habits? Get an Uber and come back right now. I'm giving you 30 minutes. If you're not back, you'll regret it." Beside me, my father had heard everything. He took the phone from my hand and put it on speaker. He didn't say anything, just signaled to David to turn on the living room's sound system. A graceful, classical symphony filled the air, the sound quality so pristine it could only come from a 6-figure audio setup. "Do you hear that?" I asked Ethan again. "What's that noise? Are you at a coffee shop? Must be nice to have so much free time," he snapped. "No, it's the music at my father's house," I said with a soft, chilling smile. "You just enjoy your meal, eat as much as you can, because I'm afraid this will be the last good meal you'll have for the rest of your life." What are you talking about? Are you cursing me?" Ethan stammered, a note of anxiety finally creeping into his voice. "I'm not cursing you. I'm just warning you," I said slowly, enunciating each word. "Oh, and by the way, the lobster there is delicious. Make sure you eat the shell, too. Soon, you won't even be able to afford the shells." I hung up. My hand was shaking not from fear, but from the cruel thrill of instilling terror in the man who had trampled on me. My father patted my shoulder. "Well done, sweetheart. Now go rest. Let me finish taking out the trash." But I shook my head. "No, Dad. I want to watch. I want to see him squirm in the mud pit he dug for himself." Just as I predicted, 60 minutes after my call, the real storm hit the Thompson family's dinner table. Ethan's phone was no longer a communication device. It was a time bomb, ringing incessantly with calls of doom. "Mr. Thompson, it's a disaster!" His head accountant's frantic voice shrieked through the speakerphone, which Ethan, in his panic, had forgotten to turn off. "The IRS is raiding the office. They're seizing all our files, our computers. They're saying the company is guilty of tax evasion, fraud, and money laundering. You need to get here right now." "What?" Ethan dropped his phone into a bowl of dipping sauce. He scrambled to pick it up, wiping it on his pants, his face ashen. "What are you talking about? Who's laundering money? Who's evading taxes?" Before he could process it, another call came in. It was the branch manager of his bank, the same man who had invited him to play golf just yesterday. "Ethan, I'm calling to inform you that the loan on your condo and your Maybach is now in default. The bank has received information that the collateral is legally compromised. We are proceeding with immediate repossession of the assets. You need to prepare to hand over the car and the property." Ethan's ears were ringing. His vision swam. He collapsed back into his chair, his legs turning to jelly. The premium Wagyu in his bowl now looked like a pile of rocks pressing down on his chest. Brenda, seeing her son's green face and the sweat pouring off him, grew alarmed. "Ethan, what's wrong with you? Did you get sick? Did you eat something bad?" "Mom," Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse. "It's all gone. Everything is gone." "What's gone? Did you lose your wallet?" Brenda started patting her son's pockets. "The company, the condo, the car, it's all gone. And we're ruined," Ethan wailed, a gut-wrenching sound that drew the attention of the entire restaurant. People began to point and whisper. The looks of admiration from earlier had turned into morbid curiosity. Sarah, terrified, quickly ended her live stream, her face pale. "Are you kidding, Ethan? Don't scare me like that. What do you mean, ruined?" "Then, who's going to pay for dinner?" Her question was like a knife twisting in Ethan's gut. He fumbled for his wallet, where he had a few spare dollars and his wife's powerful black card. That was it, the black card. The card with the $50,000 limit. It was like a drowning man grasping at a piece of driftwood. He quickly tried to compose himself. It's fine, it's fine. It must be some mistake. I still have Olivia's card. One swipe and we're done. Just keep eating, Mom. Let me make a call and sort this out. But his hands trembled so much he couldn't even dial a number. Cold sweat ran down his neck, dripping onto the table, creating a pathetic, chaotic scene. And the worst was yet to come. Waiting for him at the checkout counter. The party ended in an atmosphere as heavy as a funeral. Brenda, not wanting to waste the expensive food, tried to stuff a few more pieces of steak into her mouth and even sneakily tried to pack leftovers into a plastic bag, but a waiter politely stopped her, causing her to curse under her breath. The bill arrived. Sir, your total comes to $1,580.75, said the young waiter, the same one Ethan had belittled earlier. He wore a professional smile, but his eyes were cold. Brenda gasped. What? Over $1,500 for a little dinner? This is highway robbery. I want to see the manager. It's okay, Mom. Ethan cut her off, trying to salvage his last shred of dignity in front of the gawking crowd. He stood up, adjusted his stained blazer, and pulled out the black card, holding it between two fingers with a practiced, nonchalant air. Just charge it. The waiter took the card and ran it through the machine. Beep, beep, beep. A red error light flashed. The waiter tried again, the same shrill electronic shriek of failure. I'm sorry, sir. The transaction has been declined, the waiter said, returning the card. His voice was slightly louder this time, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. Declined? What do you mean declined? Do you even know how to use that thing? Ethan yelled, his voice cracking with fear. That card has a $50,000 limit. I could buy this whole restaurant with it. He snatched the card back, wiped it on his shirt, and handed it back. Try it again. Your machine must be broken. The waiter patiently tried a third time. The same words flashed on the screen in glaring red letters. Transaction declined. A dead silence fell over their section of the restaurant. A few women at the next table started snickering. Well, I thought he was some big shot. Turns out he's just a fake. Can't even pay for dinner. Ethan was drenched in sweat. He pulled out every other card from his wallet, his Visa, his MasterCard, his debit card. He tried them one by one. Beep, card locked. Beep, insufficient funds. Beep, card expired. Every escape route had been cut off. I had locked the black card, and the bank had frozen his accounts. He was now standing in a luxury restaurant with a $1,500 bill and not enough cash in his pocket to pay for it. The restaurant manager, a large, fleshy man, came over. He looked Ethan up and down with unconcealed contempt. What's the problem here? Planning on a dine and dash? If you don't have the money, you can leave your watch or your phone as collateral and call someone to bring the cash. We don't run a charity here. Trembling, Ethan took off his Swiss watch. It was a cheap replica he'd bought for $50, but he had told his mother it was worth $5,000. He placed it on the counter. Here, I'll leave this. The manager picked it up, glanced at it for a second, and tossed it back on the table. This is a fake. The plating is already peeling. You think this is worth $1,500? Are you kidding me? Security. Lock the doors and call the police. We've got a fraud case here. At the mention of the police, Brenda threw herself on the floor and began to wail. Help! They're trying to kill us. They're calling the cops on an old woman just for having dinner. Ethan stood frozen, his face dark. In a moment of pure desperation, he pulled out his phone, intending to call his brothers to borrow some cash. The number you have dialed is not in service. This user is currently busy. I don't know you. Stop calling. Everyone had turned their back on him. He was completely alone. Just then, his phone screen lit up. It was a new text message. From me. What's wrong, darling? Card not working? Should I tell my dad to buy the restaurant and comp your meal? Oh, but wait. My dad says he doesn't support freeloaders. Ethan stared at the message, then at the security guards approaching with menacing looks. He knew, then, that hell had just opened its gates to welcome him. The cacophony in the restaurant seemed to fade into a vacuum, leaving an eerie silence around my husband's family. I sat in the plush comfort of the Rolls-Royce, my eyes glued to the iPad streaming the restaurant's security footage. A strange mix of bitter satisfaction and lingering sadness coursed through me. Ethan stood there, sweat pouring down his face, frantically searching every pocket, his pants, his blazer, even the fake alligator wallet he was once so proud of. His fingers trembled as he pulled out crumpled bills and useless plastic cards. "What seems to be the problem, Mr. Thompson? I thought you were covering everything," the manager's voice dripped with sarcasm. He stood with his arms crossed, his gaze sharp, watching the man shrink under the pressure. The burly security guards had formed a human wall around them, blocking any thought of escape. Brenda had stopped her theatrics. She sat on the cold tile floor, her face ashen, her eyes darting around for an escape route that didn't exist. The haughty pride of a CEO's mother had been stripped away, leaving her looking like a common thief caught in the act. I'll leave this watch," Ethan stammered, holding out the fake watch. "It's a Patek Philippe. I bought it in Switzerland for $5,000. You can hold it until I bring the money tomorrow." The manager held the watch up to the light. It took him all of 3 seconds. He smirked and tossed it onto the marble tabletop with a clatter that sounded like a nail being hammered into the coffin of Ethan's dignity. "Buddy, are you for real? This is a cheap knockoff from Canal Street. You think you can use this to cover a nearly $1,600 bill? You must think we're idiots." Ethan's face turned a bruised shade of purple. He turned to his mother and sister, his eyes pleading for help. Sarah, my ever-dramatic sister-in-law, was now trying to make herself invisible, clutching her purse and pretending she didn't know the man making a scene. "Sarah, do you have any money? Let me borrow it. I'll pay you back double tomorrow," Ethan pleaded, grabbing his sister's arm. Sarah yanked her arm away as if she'd been burned. "Are you crazy? Where would I get that kind of money? All my cash is tied up in my online boutique. I only have enough for a taxi." "You're the CEO. You figure it out." "You're lying. I saw you bragging online yesterday about selling 100 orders. Ethan lost what little composure he had left. He started wrestling with his own sister for her purse in the middle of the crowded restaurant. The scene of 2 siblings tearing at each other over money was a spectacle for the other diners. People pulled out their phones to record. Laughter and jeers erupted. "Look at that. I thought he was a tycoon. Turns out he's just broke. All talk and no cash. Someone get this on video? This is gold." Brenda, seeing her children fighting, let out a pathetic cry. "Oh, this family is cursed. Ethan, let your sister go. Are you going to rob her to pay your debts?" Finally, under the threat of the guards and the crushing weight of public humiliation, Sarah reluctantly pulled out a messy wad of cash. Ethan had to empty his own pockets and take out several high-interest payday loans on his phone right then and there. Between them, they barely scraped together enough to cover the bill. The manager counted the cash carefully before nodding to his guards. "Next time you're broke, eat at a food truck. Don't come in here and dirty our seats. Now get out." The 3 of them shuffled out of the restaurant, heads bowed in shame. I watched Ethan's slumped shoulders on the screen, feeling no pity. This was only the beginning. The price for betrayal wasn't just one expensive meal. They walked through the revolving doors thinking the nightmare was over, but they didn't know the real storm was waiting for them in the parking lot, where Ethan's last shred of pride, his Maybach, was about to be ripped from his grasp forever. A sudden downpour washed over the city, cleansing the streets, but exposing the misery of its inhabitants. The 3 of them stood huddled under the restaurant's awning, watching the sheets of rain. The cold wind made Brenda shiver and sneeze, her gaudy red dress now soaked and clinging to her, making her look like a drowned turkey. "Where's the car? Tell the valet to bring the car around now. I'm freezing to death," Brenda pounded on her son's back. Ethan looked around nervously. Just as he was about to call for the valet, a calm, firm voice cut through the sound of the rain. "There's no need to look. The car no longer belongs to you." A man in a black suit, holding a briefcase and sheltered by a bodyguard with an umbrella, emerged from the rain. It was Mr. Harrison, the head of the legal department for my father's corporation, a man known in legal circles as Harrison the Hammer. His face was impassive, radiating an authority that made people instinctively shrink back. Who are you? Where's my car?" Ethan stammered. Mr. Harrison calmly pulled a thick file from his briefcase and held it out. The top page, bearing the official seals of the court and the bank, was splattered with rain, but the words were still perfectly clear. "I am the legal representative for the owner of the Maybach license plate." He read the number aloud. "According to the power of attorney and the credit agreement you signed, you may have neglected to read the fine print. This vehicle is the property of your wife, Miss Olivia Sterling. Due to your severe breach of the terms regarding marital assets, combined with your company's loan defaults, which triggered a cross-collateral repossession clause, my client has decided to reclaim her property, effective immediately." The words hit Ethan like a lightning strike. He lunged for the papers, but the bodyguard, built like a linebacker, simply pushed him back. He stumbled and fell onto the wet, slippery pavement. "You're lying. I drive that car, I pay for the gas, I maintain it. It's my image. You have no right." Ethan screamed in desperation, rainwater mixing with the tears streaming down his contorted face. Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses, his voice as steady as a machine. "You were merely borrowing the car to maintain an image, Mr. Thompson. Miss Sterling was very generous to let you use it for the past 2 years to fool the world. But today, when you forced her and your newborn child to take a bus, you burned your last bridge." With that, Mr. Harrison held up the familiar key fob. In the distance, the Maybach's lights flashed twice. The engine roared to life, and the car glided away into the rain, leaving Ethan sitting on the pavement, reaching out helplessly, as if trying to catch a shattered dream. "My son's car! Oh, heavens, the car is gone! How will we live?" Brenda collapsed onto the ground, wailing and kicking her feet in a puddle of dirty water. Sarah stood beside her, pale and silent, terrified of being dragged further into the mess. Other luxury cars began to pull out of the valet, their headlights sweeping over the 3 pathetic figures writhing in the rain. No one stopped. No one offered help. The high society world they had so desperately wanted to join was, by its very nature, ruthlessly cold. Ethan sat there, his expensive suit, which I had paid for now, covered in mud. The car wasn't just a vehicle. It was the entire foundation of his successful CEO identity. Now, he was back to what he truly was, a broke, powerless man drowning in debt. "Home. Let's go home," he muttered, his voice trembling. "To the condo. At least we still have the condo." He scrambled to his feet, pulling his mother and sister up. The 3 of them staggered toward the street to hail a cab. But in the pouring rain of rush hour, every taxi was occupied. Worse, seeing their drenched and disheveled state, no driver wanted to let them in. They ended up having to call a single Uber, cramming 3 people into the back seat, and began the slow, humiliating journey back to the luxury apartment building Ethan still called his home. But he had no idea that his home had now become a cold, empty trap, and the last door of refuge was about to be sealed shut. The grand lobby of the Royalton Residences building offered no comfort tonight. As Ethan, Brenda, and Sarah trudged inside, they left a long trail of dirty water on the polished marble floor. The doorman gave them a suspicious look, but, recognizing them, said nothing. Ethan, trying to hold on to his last bit of pride, held his head high as he walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the 18th floor. "We're almost home, Mom. You can take a hot shower. I'll turn on the heat for you. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll figure it out. I'll get the money, I'll get the car back," he said, though his own voice lacked any conviction. Ding. The elevator opened onto the quiet hallway. Ethan rushed to apartment 1806, his trembling hands trying to insert the key into the lock. But it wouldn't go in. He tried again and again, turning it over, sweat breaking out on his brow. "What's wrong? Are you drunk? Can't you open your own door?" Brenda demanded impatiently. It's not working, Mom. I think the lock has been changed," he stammered, his face draining of all color. Just then, the door swung open from the inside, but it wasn't me. It was a stout, middle-aged woman with a heavily powdered face, bright red lipstick, and a vape pen, puffing out a cloud of smoke. It was Mrs. Gable, the actual owner of the apartment. a woman I had arranged to rent from under her name to test Ethan's character for the past 2 years. Mrs. Gable eyed the 3 drenched figures at her door, a sneer on her face. Well, if it isn't CEO Thompson, did the whole family go for a swim in the river? You! What are you doing in my apartment? Ethan yelled. Did you change my locks? Do you know that breaking and entering is a crime? Mrs. Gable laughed, a loud, booming laugh that echoed down the hall. Your apartment? Wake up, Sonny. This is my apartment. I rented it to your wife. And this morning, your wife called to terminate the lease. Said you were 6 months behind on rent and utilities and she wasn't going to cover for you anymore. So, I came to take my property back. Simple as that. Brenda's eyes widened in shock, and she clutched her chest. What? A rental? You told me you bought it for $5 million. You said the deed was in the safe. Ethan! Ethan stood frozen. His biggest secret, the lie he had maintained for years, was now laid bare. He had lied to his mother, his sister, his entire family, claiming he had bought a luxury condo in the city. In reality, the money I gave him for rent each month had been gambled away or spent on other women, leaving him deep in debt. Now, no need for theatrics, Mrs. Gable said, waving her hand dismissively toward a pile of luggage and boxes stacked messily in the hallway. I've already had all your things moved out. Your clothes, your shoes, even those fake Entrepreneur of the Year plaques of yours. Take them and get out of my sight. I have new tenants coming. Oh, and your 3-month security deposit? That's going toward your unpaid rent. You still owe me $2,000 for utilities. Pay up, or I'll post your story all over social media. Please. My mother is sick. It's raining. If you kick us out, where will we go? Ethan fell to his knees, begging. Just let us stay for 1 night. We'll be gone in the morning. Not a chance. This isn't a homeless shelter. Get lost. Mrs. Gable slammed the door shut. The click of the deadbolt was like a judge's gavel sealing their fate. The shock was too much for Brenda. She let out a small gasp and fainted, collapsing onto the hallway floor. Sarah screamed, Mom! Mom! Ethan, I think she's dead! Ethan cradled his mother, sobbing hysterically. He looked at the closed door, then at their belongings piled up like garbage. For the first time in his life, he felt the absolute powerlessness of a man with nothing. No car, no home, no money. Where do we go now? Oh my God, where do we go? Sarah cried, her mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. Suddenly, Ethan remembered my phone call from earlier. My voice echoed in his mind, not as a lifeline, but as a rotten piece of wood in a flood. I'm at my father's house. He vaguely recalled a time we were driving through the exclusive Greenwich Estates neighborhood. I had pointed to the largest, most spectacular mansion and joked, when we get old, let's retire here. That's my dad's house. He had laughed at me then, calling me delusional. But now, it was his only hope. Olivia's house, he thought, gritting his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. She can't be so cruel as to let her own mother-in-law die on the street. The journey from the city to the suburban estates was the longest and most miserable of their lives. With no money for a taxi and their phones dead, they had to use Sarah's last few dollars to take the bus, the very mode of transport Ethan had scorned just hours before. On the bus, he huddled in a back corner, hiding his face with his jacket, terrified of being recognized. Brenda had revived but lay limply against Sarah, moaning and cursing my name with what little strength she had. After getting off the bus, they had to walk another 2 miles in the dark, pouring rain to reach the gated community. The elegant cobblestone roads were slick, and Brenda fell several times. I can't walk anymore, she wheezed, collapsing onto the curb. That wretched girl, she ruined me. She tricked me. Just a little further, Mom. Once we get there, I'll make her kneel and apologize to you. I'll make her give me back all my money, Ethan seethed, half dragging his mother along. He still clung to the delusion that I was just throwing a tantrum, that once he showed up and asserted his authority as a husband, I would relent. Sarah trudged beside them, the heel of her shoe long broken. She walked barefoot, crying from the cold and the pain. This is all your fault. You said you had everything under control, and now look at us. I would have been better off staying in our small town. Shut up, Ethan spun around and slapped his sister across the face. "When I had money, you were happy to spend it. Now that I'm down, you turn on me?" Three ghosts, arguing and tearing at each other in the dark. Hunger, cold, and fear had stripped away all pretense, revealing their true, selfish natures. Finally, they saw the warm, yellow glow of European-style street lamps. Before them stood Greenwich Estates, the enclave of the super-rich. And in the center, the most prominent of all, was my family's estate. The 10-foot-tall iron gates were intricately designed, the stone walls stretching endlessly in either direction, dotted with security cameras. The main house was lit up like a palace from a fairy tale. Ethan stood before the gate, staring up at its grandeur, feeling as small as an ant. He swallowed hard, his earlier confidence vanishing. But the cold and hunger pushed him forward. He rushed to the gate and banged on the cold iron. "Olivia! Olivia! Open up! It's me, your husband." His pounding echoed in the rainy night, but the only response was the imposing silence of the mansion. "Olivia, are you coming out? Your mother-in-law is dying out here. Are you trying to kill her?" Suddenly, a bright spotlight from the guardhouse flashed on, blinding them. A side gate buzzed and slowly opened. Ethan's face lit up. "She's opening it. She's scared. We're in." But it wasn't me who emerged. It was David, my family's head of staff, dressed in a pristine black suit and white gloves. He was followed by two towering security guards, each holding the leash of a German shepherd that was growling low in its throat. David stood blocking the entrance, looking at the three bedraggled figures with the detached curiosity one might reserve for strange insects. He said nothing, merely taking a silk handkerchief from his pocket and holding it to his nose, as if to filter out their contaminated air. "Who are you looking for?" he asked, his voice quiet but resonant with authority. "I'm here to see my wife, Olivia. Tell her to come out here." "I'm her husband," Ethan said, trying to sound commanding. David raised an eyebrow, his expression a mask of derision. "There is no Olivia, your wife, here. There is only Miss Olivia Sterling, the sole heir to Sterling Holdings. And as I recall, Miss Sterling does not have a husband who looks quite so disheveled." "You, how dare you insult me? I'm a CEO," Ethan sputtered. "A CEO?" David gave a small, chilling laugh. "The CEO of a bankrupt shell company that's been seized by the government? Mr. Thompson, perhaps you should take a look in a mirror." With a nod from David, one of the guards stepped forward and tossed a folder into a puddle at Ethan's feet. The splash soaked the papers inside. "Miss Sterling asked me to give you this. It's a petition for divorce. She has already signed it. Whether you sign it is your choice, but I'd advise you to do so quickly. Every second you delay, your debt grows." Ethan stared at the divorce papers floating in the muddy water. The words "divorce petition" were like a hammer blow. "No, I want to see her. Let me in." He tried to charge forward, but the two German shepherds lunged, barking fiercely, causing him to scramble backward and fall to the ground. Seeing the dogs, Brenda shrieked in terror and wet herself, a dark stain spreading on her dress. She clasped her hands together, bowing to David. "Sir, please, I beg you, sir. Let us in out of the rain. My grandson is in there." "My only grandson?" David looked at Brenda with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Madam, when you were forcing Miss Sterling and her newborn onto a bus, were you thinking of your grandson then? When you were feasting at a steakhouse, did you think about your daughter-in-law, cold and in pain? This is a private residence, not a public market. You cannot come and go as you please. Close the gate," David commanded. The heavy iron gate began to close, squeezing the warm light from within into a smaller and smaller sliver. But just before it shut completely, a figure appeared on the second-floor balcony. Bathed in the light from the grand foyer, I stood there in a simple white silk dress, holding a sleeping Noah in my arms. I looked down at the three pathetic figures below. My eyes met Ethan's. In that moment, time stood still. He saw me, the country bumpkin wife he had despised, now looking elegant, regal, and as untouchable as a queen. He reached a hand out, his lips forming my name. But the sound was swallowed by the final, deafening clang of the iron gate slamming shut, plunging him and his family into darkness and despair. The heavy iron gate clanged shut, severing Ethan's desperate gaze. Yet the image of those three drenched, shivering figures remained seared in my mind. I stood on the balcony, the cold wind and rain whipping against me, but it couldn't extinguish the slow-burning fire within. Noah stirred in my arms. His warmth was the only thing tethering me to the present, reminding me not to waver. "Miss Olivia, your father requests that you come inside out of the cold. I will handle things out here." David's voice came through my earpiece. I glanced down and saw him directing the guards to hose down the area where the Thompsons had stood, as if washing away their bad luck. "David, let them into the gatehouse," I said into the comms, my voice so calm it surprised even me. "I want to end this tonight. If I let it drag on, I'm afraid I'll start to feel disgusted with myself all over again." 5 minutes later, I descended the grand staircase into the main drawing room. The opulent space with its crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, and priceless oil paintings only made the three figures huddled on a leather sofa in the corner seem more pathetic and out of place. Rainwater dripped from their clothes, forming murky puddles on the polished marble floor. As I entered, the click of my heels echoed with an air of command. I was no longer in a frumpy nightgown smelling of sour milk. I wore a pearl-white silk gown, my hair styled in an elegant chignon. Ethan looked up, his eyes wide, his mouth agape. He looked at me as if seeing a complete stranger, a goddess he was never worthy of approaching. "Olivia, is that you?" he stammered. He started to rise, to grab my arm out of his old, possessive habit, but the cold glare of the two bodyguards standing behind me froze him in place. I sat in the armchair opposite them, crossed my legs, and let my gaze drift over their three haggard faces. "That's a silly question. Who else would I be? Or were you hoping I was one of those young models you keep liking online?" I offered a small, cold smile. Brenda, recovering from her shock, gawked at the lavish room. The greedy glint returned to her eyes, overpowering her fear. So you really are a tycoon's daughter, Olivia?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. "I knew it! A woman with your grace and beauty. I always suspected you came from a noble family. My Ethan is so lucky to have married you." I watched her performance with pure contempt. "You forget quickly, Brenda," I cut her off. "Just this afternoon you were calling me a country bumpkin, a jinx, a freeloader. How did I suddenly become noble?" "Oh, that was just a joke. I was just teasing you, dear. I love you the most." She lunged forward to grab my hand, but I pulled it back, causing her to stumble. Ethan seemed to have regained some of his composure. He saw a glimmer of hope. He thought that as long as I was his wife, this fortune, this mansion, my father's power, it could all be his. "Olivia, you really kept this a secret from me," he said with a forced, intimate smile. "What a test you put me through. But let's let bygones be bygones. We're family now. Your father is my father. Just tell him to unfreeze my accounts and give me back the keys to the Maybach. I have a contract to sign tomorrow, and I can't show up in a taxi." I stared at him, feeling like I was looking at a monster. Even now, all he could think about was money and his pathetic ego. Not one word about our son, not one sincere apology. "Family?" I laughed, the sound echoing coldly. "Ethan Thompson, take a good look at yourself. What gives you the right to call yourself my family? The right of a husband who forces his wife, fresh from a C-section, onto a bus? Or the right of a man who uses his wife's money to cheat on her while pretending to be a self-made mogul?" His face hardened. "Don't you go too far, Olivia. I am your husband. I am the father of your child. You're this wealthy, and you let your husband's family suffer like this? Aren't you afraid of what people will say? Aren't you afraid of karma?" "Karma?" I stood up and slammed my iPad down on the table. The sharp crack made all three of them jump. "You want to talk about karma? Fine. Let me show you what karma looks like." I pressed play. An audio recording filled the room, crystal clear. It was Brenda's shrill voice. "Ethan, you better keep a tight grip on the money. Now that she's had the baby, she's served her purpose. Once my grandson is a little older, find an excuse to kick her out and marry someone from a better family." Then came Ethan's cackle. "Don't worry, Mom, I've got it all planned. I'm having my lawyer transfer the title of the Maybach to my name. Once that's done, I'll dump her so fast her head will spin. She's an idiot. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. Ethan's face went from pale to sheet white. Brenda's jaw dropped. Sarah stared at the floor. "Did you hear that?" I said, my eyes blazing. "That was a conversation from inside my car yesterday, when you thought I was oblivious. Karma comes quickly, Ethan, and it's standing right in front of you." The drawing room doors opened. My father walked in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers and Mr. Harrison, the lawyer. The air grew thick, heavy, and suffocating. "Ethan Thompson," my father said, his voice low and powerful, like the pronouncement of a death sentence. "You have 2 choices. Listen carefully." The grand drawing room had become a makeshift courtroom. My father sat opposite them, the very picture of a man in complete control. He took a slow sip of tea, letting the silence torture them. The 2 officers stood stone-faced by the door. Mr. Sterling, sir," Ethan stammered, trying to stand but collapsing back onto the sofa. Why are the police here? This is a family matter. We can settle it privately." "Who is your family?" my father shot back, setting his cup down with a sharp clink. "I have no son-in-law who is a con artist, a fraud, and a tax evader." Seeing the situation escalating, Brenda resorted to her final tactic, begging. She crawled across the floor and clutched at the hem of my silk dress, her face a mess of tears and snot. "Olivia, my child, I'm begging you. Forgive my son. He was foolish. He was led astray by bad friends. Please don't let the father of your child go to jail." I looked down at the woman who used to order me around, who called me useless, now groveling at my feet. I felt nothing but disgust. "Get up. You're dirtying my dress," I said coldly, yanking the fabric from her grasp. "When you were coaching your son on how to steal my car, were you thinking of me then? When you called me a used-up incubator, did you think of me as your daughter-in-law? Don't use my son to emotionally blackmail me now. It won't work." Sarah, seeing her mother rebuffed, also dropped to her knees. "Sister-in-law, please, I was wrong. I was just jealous of you. That's why I said those things. Please forgive Ethan. If he goes to jail, our family is finished." "Sarah, you're not naive. You're smart," I said. "You took your fair share of the money Ethan stole from me to buy your clothes and makeup, didn't you? Don't worry. My lawyer has a complete record of every transfer he made to you. That makes you an accessory." At the word accessory, Sarah's face went white, and she fell silent. Ethan looked at his pathetic mother and sister, then back at my father and me. He knew he was trapped. The pride of a patriarchal man was warring with his terror of prison. Fear won. He knelt, his knees hitting the cold marble floor. "Olivia, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I'm a terrible person. I was greedy, arrogant. But please, think of Noah. He's so young. He can't have a father in prison. I'll do anything. I'll be a slave for your family. Just please don't send me to jail." He was crying, but they were not tears of remorse for hurting me. They were tears of regret for getting caught. My father signaled to Mr. Harrison, who stepped forward and placed a file and an expensive fountain pen on the table. "Enough with the performance, Mr. Thompson. The audience is bored," the lawyer said. "There are 2 documents here. You have a choice." Ethan looked at the file fearfully. "Option 1, Mr. Harrison stated. You sign nothing. We immediately forward the entire case file, financial fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, to the district attorney's office. Given the amount you've stolen, you're looking at a sentence of 12 to 20 years in federal prison, and, of course, you'll still have to pay back every cent." Brenda gasped at the number 20 and clutched her chest, looking like she was having a genuine heart attack. "Option 2, Mr. Harrison continued, flipping to the second document. You sign this amicable divorce petition, granting full and sole custody of your son to Miss Sterling. You will walk away with nothing. No claim to any marital assets, as they were all funded by Miss Sterling to begin with. In return, she will not press criminal charges regarding the funds you embezzled from the family, and my client will use his influence to persuade your other creditors to arrange a payment plan. You won't go to prison, but you will be, in the truest sense of the word, destitute." Ethan stared at the 2 choices, cold prison bars or a life of freedom in humiliating poverty. I knew which he would choose. He loved himself more than anything. I choose, he said, his hand trembling as he reached for the pen. Suddenly, Brenda lunged forward, grabbing his arm. Don't sign it. If you sign, we lose everything. My grandson, I won't let her raise him. I let out a bitter laugh. Even now, she only saw my son as a possession. Think carefully, Brenda, I said. His father is in jail for 20 years, you're old and sick, and Sarah is useless. What will you feed him? Will he grow up with the shame of being the son of a convicted felon? Ethan pushed his mother's hand away. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and defeat. I'll sign. The scratch of the pen on paper was the only sound in the room. He signed his name, a shaky, distorted version of the confident signature he used to flaunt. When he was done, he dropped the pen and slumped in his chair like a puppet with its strings cut. The dream was over. Brenda sobbed quietly on the floor. Mr. Harrison collected the documents. The proceedings are complete. You may leave now, David announced, his voice like ice. The three of them staggered to their feet and shuffled toward the door like beggars. But just before they left, I stopped them. Wait. Ethan froze, perhaps hoping for one last handout. I walked toward him and tossed my wedding ring onto the floor at his feet. It was a thin, simple gold band that I had paid for myself because he had claimed all his money was tied up in business. Take it, I said. You can probably sell it for bus fare. He looked at the ring, his face flushing with shame. He picked it up, his knuckles white. He looked at me, his eyes filled with the impotent rage of a cornered man. Olivia, you remember this day. You pushed me to this, you'll pay for this. Karma will get you. You're right. Karma doesn't miss anyone, I replied calmly. And this is your karma. You sowed betrayal, and now you reap ruin. Don't threaten me with karma. I have nothing to be ashamed of. You, on the other hand, should worry about how you're going to survive the darkness you've created for yourself. He said nothing more. He turned and pulled his broken family out into the night. The heavy door closed behind them, ending the 2-year nightmare of my marriage. The air in the room instantly felt lighter. My father came and put his arm around my shoulder. It's over, sweetheart. You're free. I leaned against him. And only then did I let myself cry not tears of pain, but tears of release. 3 years later, I was no longer the naive girl who believed in love in a cottage. I was now the vice president of Sterling Holdings and the founder of a successful charity for single mothers. My life was full, busy, and centered around Noah, now a bright, happy 3-year-old boy. One crisp autumn afternoon, I picked Noah up from his preschool. As we walked toward the car near Central Park, he dropped his new toy car, and it rolled into the street. "Noah, stop!" I yelled, pulling him back as a beat-up delivery scooter screeched to a halt right next to the toy. The driver was a gaunt, haggard-looking man in a worn-out delivery uniform. He took off his helmet, revealing a tired, prematurely aged face. He picked up the toy, carefully brushed it off, and walked toward us. "Here you go, little guy. Be careful next time." That voice, hoarse, tired, but painfully familiar. I looked up, and our eyes met. It was Ethan. 3 years had aged him a decade. His face was lined with hardship, his eyes hollowed out. The arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by a man broken by life. He recognized me, too. His hand holding the toy trembled. He looked at me, at my expensive clothes, at the Porsche parked nearby, and finally his gaze rested on Noah, the healthy, well-dressed, happy son he had cast aside. "Olivia," he whispered, his lips barely moving. "Thank you, mister," Noah said politely, taking the toy with both hands. "Are you okay? Your hand is shaking." The innocent question was like a knife in Ethan's heart. He quickly hid his calloused, dirty hands behind his back, as if afraid to contaminate the beautiful child before him. I'm fine," he choked out. He wanted to say more, to say I'm your father, but the words wouldn't come. He looked at his own ragged appearance and knew he had lost all right to do so. I pulled Noah back a step and gave Ethan a polite, distant nod the kind one gives a stranger. "Thank you for getting that for him," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Noah, say bye-bye. Let's go home." "Bye-bye, mister," Noah waved. I turned and walked away. I could feel his gaze on my back, a look of unbearable regret and loss. "Olivia." A faint, broken whisper followed us, but I didn't turn around. What could tears do now? They couldn't erase the past. But as I settled into my car, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Ethan was still standing there, his face buried in his hands, sobbing like a lost child in the middle of the bustling city. The sight stirred a strange, detached pity in me. Not love, not hate, just a sorrow for a man who had single-handedly destroyed his own life. Later that week, I had my assistant look into his situation. Brenda was bedridden after a stroke. Sarah had disappeared. Ethan was working around the clock on his scooter to pay for his mother's care, living in a squalid room in a rough part of town. He was paying his price. I took a bundle of cash from my safe. It wasn't much to me, but it would be a lifeline for him. I had David arrange for an anonymous donation to be made through a charity, citing aid for the sick and elderly. No name, no trace back to me. "Miss, after all they did," David began, concerned. "This isn't for them, David," I said with a small, peaceful smile. "It's for me. It's to let go of the last bit of anger. And it's for Noah's karma. The greatest punishment isn't to crush someone completely, but to let them live with their conscience." A few days later, my assistant reported that Ethan had received the money. He had fallen to his knees and wept, then used it to get his mother better medical care and buy a more reliable scooter. He simply worked, day in and day out. Perhaps he guessed where the help came from, but he never tried to contact me. He understood that living a better, quieter life was the only apology he could offer. The storms had passed. My sky, and my son's, was now full of sunshine.